Alright, so I've tried my best to find a way to ease you into this theory, but my god, there's just so much information that splits into even more information that I can't find an easy way in. So, if you need to grab a coffee, do it. If you need to breathe in, go ahead. Take a moment, because we're going straight into it. So we need to establish a couple of things. First, voices. According to Arisu, all four heroines sound more or less like Apollo. I say more or less because Arisu did make the distinction that Iko's voice sounds similar to Apollo's harsh voice, and Nene's voice sounds like her angry voice, while he straight up said Rikka and Shinobu sound just like Apollo. Now, what that means is that they all sound like Apollo to Arisu, so their voices won't hold any significance in determining Apollo's identity. Second, this is a very strange flash forward, but chapter 5 throws a bit of a curveball, showing that Arisu gets married, but not necessarily to Apollo. It's also confirmed that he gets married in chapter 66. I will talk about this in detail later in the video, because it's going to be pretty long and it's not exactly relevant to Apollo's identity. But what I would like you to keep in mind is that Apollo isn't necessarily Arisu's wife. With that out of the way, let's first take a quick look at any potential visual clues that we got regarding Apollo. I very much doubt the mangaka left anything significant in Apollo's appearance, like her hairstyle, her smile, her nails, her body shape, but what I found a bit interesting is this scene in chapter 15. Here Arisu interacts with Apollo in the life story, so with one of the four heroines. And we get this silhouette with this pose, leaning forward slightly with her hands behind her back. The reason it stuck out to me is because Apollo does it in the present, not in the past, therefore she might do it again at some point in the manga. So I said, you know what, for the sake of it, let me go through the entire manga and see which girl does this pose and how often. And interestingly enough, only two girls show off this pose, Rikka and Shinobu. Now, I expected at the very least Iko and Nene to do it once, but I diligently went through the entire manga twice and I couldn't find a single panel where Nene or Iko pose like that. Rikka and Shinobu, on the other hand, my god, do they love this pose. If you are curious, Rikka did it this many times and Shinobu this many times. This is not definitive proof or anything like that, but it did make me wonder, why didn't the mangaka have Nene and Iko pose like that at least once, just to remove any potential debate around this pose? I wouldn't put too much emphasis on it, but I wouldn't disregard it entirely either. What I would put a lot of focus on is Apollo's confession scene from chapter 14. This is the most important sequence of events that lay the foundation of Apollo's identity. It starts with her confession through Shinobu in chapter 14 and it ends with her meeting Arisu again in chapter 15. In her confession, Apollo says a few key things. 1. She betrayed Arisu, who had supported her for a long time. 2. She couldn't keep her promise to Arisu, that of becoming a voice pro and joining the pro world together with him. And 3. She was afraid that Arisu might be angry with her for breaking their promise. Now, before we really break down this promise, I want you to notice that Apollo felt guilty. Guilty for betraying him, ghosting him for 3 years, not trusting that he won't be angry with her. The reason she didn't reveal herself to Arisu was because she felt guilty, at least up to this point in the manga. And this is a bit curious because when Arisu introduced himself to his class in the first chapter, he told the girls to say to him, "I love you," as a way to find Apollo. Arisu was confident that if he heard Apollo's voice, he would recognize her. Keep in mind, only Rikka and Iko are in the same class as him. Now, Rikka actually comes up to him and whispers that she loves him in his ear, which is strange because Apollo would have no reason to believe that Arisu wouldn't be able to recognize her voice. Apollo even says she was afraid of that. So, if Apollo was feeling guilty and was afraid that Arisu would recognize her, then would she try to expose herself voluntarily? Very curious, but back to the topic at hand. Apollo and Arisu made a promise to sharpen their voice skills and join the world of pro together. However, Apollo failed to fulfill her promise and thus failed to pursue her dream. And she's feeling tremendous guilt because of that. This is one of the big reasons Apollo didn't want to reveal herself. Now, who out of the four heroines fits this failed dream the best? Well, it's not Iko, because Iko was already on the rise as a VTuber. When she first shows her channel to Arisu, she's pretty proud of her progress. On top of that, in chapter 23, she thinks she's already one of the top VTubers with her 32k subscribers count. Iko still got a long way to go, but whichever way you look at it, she didn't think she failed her dream. She's actually the only one who puts real effort into her dream, whether she gets help or not. Nino also doesn't fit. Nene, the other twin-tailed tsundere with daddy issues. There is this distinction with Nene, where her voice acting dream is more about proving her father that she can stick to one thing. It doesn't mean she's not passionate about it or that she doesn't love voice acting, but one of her priorities is to prove to her father that she's serious about voice acting. She has this order of importance, like her dream is the most important to her, then it's important to prove it to her father, and only then to prove Arisu that she made it. Also, you know how Apollo was unsure about her future career? It might look like Nene would have had the same issue, but her indecisiveness comes from the fact that she just wanted to spite her father. She would pick anything else but what her father suggested her to do. There's nothing to imply that she thinks she failed her dream or that she could feel guilty because of it. Rikka's dream of becoming a musician, now here's where things open up a bit. Rikka has been struggling to write new songs, as we see in chapter 16. She's also scared of the audience judgment. Because of that, she has low self-esteem and even views herself as inferior to Arisu. She would definitely fit right under this guilt for failing her dream, but what I want you to pay attention to is that Rikka's dream has always been centered around music, around becoming a musician since middle school. She did have a bad experience with a scouting agent, but she did not give up on music. When you look at Apollo's suggestions for her career, there is no way Rikka would think she might want to become a VTuber. Come on now. Music is so far entrenched in Rikka's character that there is zero chance she would even think of pursuing a career as a VTuber. Rikka had known Aiko since middle school. They created a song together, they surrounded themselves with music and its craft. In the life story, Rikka is still focusing on music. She has multiple arcs centered around that. So it would make a lot more sense for Rikka's dream to have always been becoming a musician rather than what Apollo said. Or at the very least, it had been her dream since middle school. It's important to note that Apollo wasn't sure about which career to pursue, and the only person who's been struggling with that is Shinobu. Shinobu's dream has an interesting history to it because the reason she wants to become an announcer is to reach her mother, wherever she may be. Her parents got divorced when she was little, she lost all contact with her mother, and she's been looking for a way to reach her. Shinobu thinks that if she achieved her dream, maybe her mother would see her name on a morning news show. Now, we don't exactly know when her parents got divorced. This could be a crucial piece of information because if they separated around the time Apollo started her broadcast, then it would only strengthen Shinobu's case. But we don't really have that information. Now, we learn in chapter 26 that Shinobu is not only nowhere near achieving her dream, but she's choosing not to pursue it. The reason for that is because she won't be able to achieve it during high school, therefore won't be able to achieve it together with Arisu. That's the vital piece of information. She's worried that Arisu will get closer to the other girls as they get closer to achieving their dreams, while she will be left behind. That forces her to choose another dream, something she could fulfill together with Arisu. This indecisiveness about her dream is not only present in the early portions of the manga, when we learn that while the other three have their own goals and ambitions, Shinobu just wants to support them. She sees herself as someone below them, someone who isn't good enough to stand alongside them. But it's also present in every one of Shinobu's arcs, like in chapter 47 when she and Arisu go to an open campus. Shinobu sees how determined Arisu is to work on achieving his dream by joining the University of Tokyo, while she is so far away from achieving hers. And this is important because Arisu said he will make all four of them go pro. Once they do that, once they fulfill their promise, Apollo could reveal herself once her vow with Arisu has been fulfilled. But Shinobu won't be able to do that, whether she pursues her dream or not. And so, she's trying to make changes, taking steps in order to find a way to fulfill her promise. So as far as Apollo's guilt for failing her dream goes, only Shinobu fits here, and does so throughout most of the manga. Matter of fact, she's the only one that deals with guilt at all. It's actually a pretty big part of her character. This clash between feeling guilty but wanting to be selfish at the same time. She also wants to form a close relationship with Arisu, but she feels guilty towards the other three. Makes you wonder, why? Just keep that in the back of your mind for now, because I want to go back to Apollo's confession before I start focusing on each character. So let's see who could have been the one behind the confession. The Broadcasting Club created a fun confession service where anyone can confess anything, usually their feelings, to the club through a string telephone, and they will broadcast that to the school anonymously. Here it gets a bit interesting. So Shinobu is the one who listens and broadcasts the confessions. The other three all have something to confess to Arisu. But surprise, out of nowhere, Apollo uses the service and confesses to Arisu. Now, naturally, you'd think someone was talking to Shinobu and she just communicated the confession through the megaphone. The end of chapter 13 makes it look like that, like she was surprised to hear something or someone. But that's quickly dismissed in the next chapter where the confession takes place. However, this could also be Shinobu pretending to convey someone else's confession when in reality she was confessing herself. There's nothing really that would contradict this. Matter of fact, there are a lot of things that would support the idea that Shinobu confessed herself. From small visual clues like how despite the confession being pretty long, we don't see Shinobu with the cup, right from the string telephone to her ear or anywhere at all. We don't see the cup whatsoever. Maybe she remembered the whole confession, but it was quite long and we know Shinobu does fumble her words. Although, mysteriously, she didn't fumble at all during the confession as stated by Arisu, to the fact that Shinobu came up with the idea for the confession service. Despite it being almost impossible, since all the teachers would be against it, she was still adamant about doing it. Why? It's a bit odd that she'd push so hard for an anonymous confession service unless she had something she wanted to confess anonymously, right? There's also her reaction when confronted by Arisu in the aftermath, and this one is especially interesting. So Shinobu is super embarrassed in these panels when Arisu questions her about who confessed. She denies knowing who it was and also says it wasn't her either. Something that will crawl back in chapter 16, but notice how she's embarrassed in these panels, but then she hugs Arisu and acts all composed and even flirty. Now, where did this sudden behavior change come from? This is actually consistent throughout the entire manga. While Shinobu is portrayed as being kind of shy and easily embarrassed, she can also flip that and become composed and a bit assertive quite easily. Like, take chapter 26 for example. She gets really embarrassed when Arisu calls the other girls by their first names, blushes like crazy when he feeds her a french fry, but then when they leave the restaurant, she offers to share her umbrella with him, she calls him a great teacher, she smiles at him. Like, this change of attitude is a bit odd, isn't it? Almost as if she's hiding something. She also does it in chapter 40 when she shows Arisu her swimsuit, in chapter 47 when she wants to drink from the same bottle as him, then in chapter 35, and this one is also especially interesting. So she bumped into Arisu at night and they ended up eating out together. A bit odd that Shinobu just so happened to walk on a random street at night and she bumped into Arisu who was out late because she went shopping with Rikka and Iko, but sure, a coincidence. What caught my attention was what she says in this panel. It should be fine that she's eating out with Arisu because she didn't plan for it. This implies that she feels some sort of guilt for her actions. Again, that guilt. But why? Is she feeling guilty towards her friends that she's making a move on him? She said she was dead last, so is she trying to keep herself dead last? She shows that she is aware everyone wants Arisu, so why is it wrong for her to want him too? Why is she feeling guilty for? Notice that she makes some bold moves even though she's masking them quite well. Now the context of chapter 35 is that the Broadcasting Club goes on a summer camp. The hotel they're staying in only has 3 double rooms, there are 6 people because Lemon comes along, so one girl will have to stay with Arisu. Shinobu explains that to Arisu, and because, according to her, no one wants to share a room with him, she offered herself. Of course, Nene 100% stalking them crushes the party. This would lead to one of Shinobu's best growth scenes, but unfortunately that's not important for this theory. What I want you to notice is this constant switch in behavior and attitude Shinobu has, the way she switches between being extremely shy to extremely composed. And this is different from how a typical shy character would act. Usually they would still be visibly embarrassed when they go out of their comfort zone, but not Shinobu. This leads us back to chapter 16. Arisu is sleeping and Shinobu takes this opportunity to tell him that he owes him 2 apologies. The first one is for suddenly hugging him back in the hallway, and the second apology is for lying to him. Even though they were partners in crimes who could share their secrets, there was something Shinobu didn't tell him during the confession service. Now, it's actually not that hard to narrow down her lie. If we just go back to those chapters and look for everything she said to Arisu that could potentially be a lie, we're left with these panels. She either lied about not knowing who confessed, or lied because she was actually the one confessing. Here's what's interesting about the first conclusion. In chapter 12, one of the girls tested the string telephone, and Shinobu couldn't tell who was speaking. It's emphasized that Shinobu couldn't tell. And honestly, if any of you used a string telephone before, like in real life, you know it's pretty hard to recognize a voice through it. Additionally, when Arisu spoke with Apollo through the string telephone, he also couldn't tell her apart, even though he had studied the girls and listened to their voices enough to notice the difference. That was his goal at the start of the series. The bottom line is that it should be nearly impossible to figure out someone's voice through a string telephone. Therefore, it should also be nearly impossible for Shinobu to recognize who was speaking. Just a side note, but since Shinobu was already feeling inferior to the other 3 and has constantly felt guilty throughout the manga, then would she really pursue Arisu knowing one of the 3 loves him and shares a history with him? Just something to keep in mind. Now this leaves us with Shinobu's confession as the lie, that she lied when she said it wasn't her who confessed. This leads us into Arisu's conversation with Apollo from chapter 15. From their conversation we can gather a couple of key moments. Arisu promised he would turn everyone in the club into pros, he will make Apollo's dream come true, he also tells her to walk the road with him. Now Apollo responds by saying she doesn't think her dream can be achieved. Now, whose dream absolutely cannot be achieved? Shinobu's. Her dream simply cannot be achieved in high school, which means it cannot be achieved together with Arisu, which also means they cannot walk the road together. That's why Shinobu tries so hard to find another dream, one that she could achieve together with Arisu while they walk on the same road. This also ties into what she says in chapter 47, that she wants to apply to the same university as Arisu so they can share the university life together. That way, her main dream, right, to become an announcer, can still be achieved together with Arisu. Shinobu being Apollo would also explain her sudden shift in behavior and this clash between selfishness and guilt she faces throughout the entire manga. On the one hand, Shinobu feels guilty for failing her promise to Arisu. On the other, she feels guilty towards her friends because she has a history with Arisu and sees it as an unfair advantage. You'll notice that Shinobu mentions this unfair advantage multiple times throughout the manga. But despite that, she doesn't want to give up on him. As we can see several times throughout the manga, she has these moments where she lets herself be selfish. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, I think Shinobu is Apollo. There are a few miscellaneous things and potential clues about Shinobu that I couldn't fit anywhere. Take them with a grain of salt because they may or may not have meaning. Like how Shinobu is the only one alone on her volume covers. The other 3 all have other characters in the covers, which stands out a bit, right, given that there are 11 volumes so far. Also, if you think about Apollo, she seemed rather lonely. She was broadcasting to one listener at 12 AM, which sounds pretty lonely to me. Out of the main 4, Shinobu seems to have been the loneliest person given her parents' divorce and everything. We know Rikka had Aiko since middle school, Nene was very close to her father, Iko might have also been lonely given that she's more of an introvert, but Shinobu just takes the cake, because she puts on this facade of being reliable and a person literally anyone could count on. We see that several times throughout the manga where she would take on any work, any task, no matter if he would use all of her free time just to fit that facade, to show people that they can rely on her. I don't want to bring real life logic into the manga, but usually, right, lonely people act like that. Also, Shinobu does these little things for Arisu that stack up. like in chapter 19, when they're in a mall and the other three leave Arisu to do their own shopping, but Shinobu actually stays behind and takes Arisu with her. Or how she always greets Arisu no matter the circumstances. These small things that someone wouldn't necessarily pay attention to. They're not big moments that you'd remember, they don't stand out, but they are consistent. She always pays attention to Arisu even in these small moments. There's also this curious bit where Arisu starts calling Rikka, Iko and Nene by their first name quite early on, while Shinobu still wants him to call her by her family name. Now, there are a lot of things about Shinobu's character that I would really like to dive into. To be honest, the characters in this manga are super well written, but I don't want to stray too far away from the theory, which is Apollo's identity. This might be a good time to address the elephant in the room, Rikka. Here's the thing with Rikka. There is no point in making a case for her being Apollo, because the mangaka is literally forcefully spoon-feeding us potential clues, suggestive scenes, play on words, everything possible to tell us, hey, don't you think Rikka is Apollo? What about now? How about now? Maybe now? Because I'm thinking, surely he is aware of what he's doing, especially when he writes scenes like this one. Rikka is on the cover of the first volume. She's also the first to engage with Arisu. She holds a bit more mystery than the others since Arisu thinks she's Apollo on multiple occasions. She says the same lines as Apollo, like in chapter 3. Then in chapter 11, she's participating in this competition where she draws a piece of paper and whatever is written on it, she has to grab. On the paper is written the person whose voice you like the most, and of course, she picks Arisu. We know Apollo has an attachment to Arisu's voice. Now, the waves associated with Rikka are the same one as Apollo's, also the waves in chapter 28. In chapter 29, Rikka says she used to write songs at midnight. What a coincidence that Apollo had her broadcast at midnight. She also says in the same chapter that she wrote some new songs for a person she distanced herself from and lacked the courage to tell them about their feelings. Now, this conversation has a double meaning because we can easily argue that Rikka is referring to her friend Aiko, but still, there is that play on words that I was mentioning. Now, what do you mean disguise, Rikka? Oh, Rikka. There she's talking about the moon and Apollo spacecraft, but still Apollo. 4 mission modes, 4 girls, 1 mode chosen, 1 girl chosen. I see what you did there, Rikka. It's so obvious that even Arisu knows it. I mean, he straight up asks Rikka in chapter 51. So here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Either the mangaka has no fucking clue on how to write mystery, or Rikka is the biggest red herring I've seen. There are so many potential clues that stack up so high, you don't even have to spot them. They are handed to you. Call me stupid, but I don't believe Rikka is Apollo. It would be way too obvious from the first couple of volumes. I won't buy it. Rikka is a red herring. However, the one who wouldn't be obvious at all and could even be a wild card is Iko. What I found curious about Iko is that I'm pretty sure only a handful of people believe she is Apollo. Matter of fact, I think Arisu himself doesn't believe she is Apollo, which puts her in this weird spot where it would be surprising if she was, but would it make sense? And I'm wondering, is that intentional on the mangaka's part? As intentional as the cover of volume 6, where if you zoom in on Iko's phone, you can see that she's broadcasting to a single viewer. Suspicious. What's interesting about Iko is that she does have social anxiety, but as long as she hides behind something, like her avatar, she can actually say anything. We can see that contrast in chapter 57. She struggles massively to cast that cringe moe spell. I mean, I get it, but she has no issue doing it behind her VTuber avatar. I mention this because she could have a different personality online than in real life. Like Apollo's personality, well, what we could gather about her, doesn't have to match Iko's personality. Do you know what I mean? However, one big reason that makes it hard for me to see Iko as Apollo is that Iko has a hard time hiding anything, and that includes her internal monologue. She lacks any kind of mystery. We are shown on several occasions that Iko is just not good at hiding her feelings and controlling her emotions. And on top of that, she even has a hard time acting, like we see early in the manga where she struggles to smile for her audience. I can't see how she would be able to conceal Apollo's identity. Now add to that the fact that she fails to meet the dream Apollo was talking about, and Nico doesn't have a strong case. Now, here's the thing. I don't 100% believe she cannot be Apollo. I did write a pretty lengthy theory in Nico's favor, but it centered around her character rather than trying to fit her into what we know about Apollo. I didn't want to squeeze that theory into this video as it wouldn't align with the structure I was trying to create, but I will put it in a separate video so you guys can see what I meant. This is more of a personal opinion, but Nene is too hot-headed and impulsive to be Apollo. As Arisu said in chapter 44, Nene let her emotions dictate her actions. I cannot imagine Nene, with her personality, having a solo broadcast. There's also the fact that she is a tsundere, right? But she's also a tsundere in her internal monologue. So really, she's not hiding anything. I did try my best to make a case for her being Apollo, but I just don't believe it. You know, if I can't convince myself that she is Apollo, then how can I sell it to you? If anyone has a strong case for Nene, I would very much like to read it. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't mention the rest of the scenes we get with Apollo, it's because they're all a bunch of nothing. For example, take the fireworks thingy. At the end of chapter 41, we get some narration from Apollo. Now, because the narration is happening at the end of the day, since the narrator says she had a lot of fun today, it means the information we have is limited to chapter 44. That's when the day ends. Basically, what Apollo says in this panel covers only the events of the first 44 chapters. Now at first glance, it looks like Apollo is saying a few important things, but actually they mean absolutely nothing. First, she would have loved to enjoy her time with the club instead of pursuing her dream. Now, that's interesting because who spends more time on their dream than on the club at this point in the story? Nobody. Second, she finally got the chance to watch the fireworks in private with Arisu. Well, the thing is they all watch them in private with Arisu, so this isn't that important. Third, she will tell Arisu something important after the fireworks. Well, that could be right after or 200 chapters later. This is the art of saying a lot while saying nothing. It's not that the scenes are irrelevant, they add layers to Apollo's personality, but other than that, there's nothing significant in them. Last but not least, I want to talk about the possibility that Apollo will not be the one who marries Arisu. Now, even though Arisu keeps saying that she just wants to find Apollo to retract that he said he loves her, it's pretty clear that he has feelings for her. On top of that, he knows she is one of the girls and they are also actively pursuing him romantically, so it's kind of impossible for him not to develop feelings for one of them, whether that turns out to be Apollo or not. Also, keep in mind that the manga doesn't exactly have anything to do with fate or any theme of destiny. It's not like Apollo and Arisu are destined to be together. There's no red string of fate or some sort of vow where they must end up together. I am aware that Rikka mentions fate once in the entire manga, but that isn't enough to be significant. The main reason I doubt Apollo is the end girl is because of chapter 66 and the play As You Like It. What's fascinating here is that the play mirrors, to a certain extent, the story between Arisu and Apollo. Now the key similarities between the play and the manga are 1. In the play the two main characters, Orlando and Rosalind, fall in love at first sight. In the manga, Arisu and Apollo are in love at the start of the story. They end up falling for each other because of how much they spoke to each other, but what's important is that the story starts with them being in love. 2. In the play Orlando and Rosalind get separated but are later reunited, the same way Arisu and Apollo get separated but are later united in high school. 3. When they get reunited, Rosalind is actually using a disguise and goes by the name Ganymede, the same way Apollo meets Arisu as one of the 4 girls. 4. After a lot of fooling around, Rosalind decides that she wants to drop the act, go back to her life and marry Orlando as her real self. And so, at the end of the story, Rosalind appears before Orlando and they get married. It's important to note that Orlando didn't find out she was Ganymede. What's interesting here is that in the play, Orlando and Ganymede went as far as to have a mock wedding ceremony. Now, if we look at chapter 5 of the manga, there is that infamous wedding photo. What's strange about it is that Arisu looks very young, no older than he looks now. It's strange because in chapter 66, we get to see Arisu in the future where he's married and looks visibly older. So, what are the chances that this photo is actually just a mock wedding photo they took sometimes during high school, the same way Orlando and Rosalind held a mock wedding? Now, if that's the case, considering Orlando and Rosalind get married in the play, are we right to assume Arisu and Apollo also get married in the manga? Well, not quite. The big difference between the play and the manga is actually Shinobu's ad-lib in chapter 67. In the manga they follow the play to the script, except for the very end when Shinobu goes off script and improvises a kiss. A fake kiss, but what's important is that she goes off script. So this could very well symbolize that the manga will go off script and instead of Arisu ending with Apollo, he will choose someone else. Or not. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Now actually, before I end this video, I do want to talk a bit more about chapter 5 because it's not quite clear whether Arisu married Apollo without knowing her identity or he married someone else. In the flash forward, Apollo is doing the last episode of her radio broadcast. That broadcast was always only for her and Arisu. It always had one listener and that was Arisu, which should also be the case here. So it's safe to say she's talking directly to Arisu in these panels. Now, this is where it gets a bit odd. Apollo reminisces about her past and about the time she and Arisu spoke over a string telephone. That was the first time Apollo revealed that she was one of the 4 girls. Then she says, "That was actually me, I wonder if you noticed back then." This implies that she revealed herself to Arisu or that Arisu figured it out himself. Otherwise, this panel would make no sense. Because back then, right, Arisu knew he was talking to Apollo. He didn't know who Apollo was, but he knew he was talking to Apollo. So, for this panel to make sense, that was actually me, Arisu must know who he's talking to in this flash forward. He must know who Apollo is. And so, if he knows who Apollo is and marries her, then this whole flash forward makes little sense. Initially, I was thinking that maybe, somehow, they're in a long-distance relationship, like they're living separately even after they got married. Chapter 66 might also confirm this, and I'm thinking this could be a cheeky way for them to communicate, like the way they used to before, and also a cheeky way to throw the readers off. Also, I'm pretty sure this confession is not part of the same sequence, because Apollo calls Arisu by his first name at the start of the conversation. Why would she call him by his last name a few dialogue lines later? I mean, she called him by his first name even when she confessed in chapter 14. I'm willing to bet that this sequence ends here and this is something else. Otherwise, it would be too inconsistent. Anyway, I won't drag it out any longer. I hope you enjoyed the video and look forward to more content on this manga.